Same as landscape photography or with portrait photography. What you're trying to do is isolate the subject. Bit like, in some ways, it's like being in a theatre. You know, you've got control of the actors on the stage. You've got control of the lighting of the actors on the stage, and what you're trying to do is put them all in the best light. So in this instance, our actors are buildings, and what we're trying to do is find the best conditions to photograph them under, and also discover things. So part of the walk yesterday was one of discovery, just learning how to look and just engage with the surroundings around you, and be a little bit more aware of what there is, things that we often walk past, and things that we can actually share by taking our images. So Maribi has isolated this really well, hasn't she? So the story here is the reflections and the different shapes and the patterns that are in the image. So a little suggestion here might be down the bottom here. For those who aren't familiar, you probably realize that when you're looking at, let me open up some of this the action page. What's it done to me? So down here in the bottom right-hand corner, we've got some controls down the bottom right-hand corner. This is where all the where my control panel is, but you'll find that a lot of it is very similar to the control panels that you get in Lightroom. So one of the things that Maribi's done here is she's put a white border around the image, which is a great way to kind of finalize and deliver it like an old Polaroid picture, or it just sort of gives a little bit of a finesse. But putting the white border around it also shows us how bright the image is. So often, if you take the white border off, the image is a little bit flat, needs a little bit of lifting. And one of the controls we can do is a levels control. And if I click on the levels panel here on the bottom here, it opens up another little panel above, and we've got a mask, and this thing next to it. If I click on that, that's the actual levels control. I just need to move this out of the way. All right. So and up above that, you can see what's on display there is the histogram. So the left-hand side is black. The little pointer in the middle is midtones, and the pointer on the right is white. Is the whites, and I can grab those pointers and I can drag them around, and I can tell Photoshop that I want the white not where it is, but I want to. If I move that to the left, you can see what it's doing is it's brightening the whites on the image. And by moving that slider in, what I can do, you can see how it just lifts the brightness of the image and really brings out the color there, and also the reflection, highlights the reflection. So what I'm doing is I'm pinching the white into the beginning of the histogram, and I can also control the midtones with this guy here. So I can brighten the midtones or I can darken the midtones. So if I want to sort of crunch this thing out a bit and really get the reflections happening, maybe I adjust the midtones a little bit. And I can turn that adjustment layer on and off by clicking the eye. And you can see just that little subtle change there. It just lifts the reflection a little bit, gives it a little bit more pop in the middle there, which is what we're trying to achieve. So these are all fine-tuning things that you can do. The other thing is just the saturation in the colors. So there's nothing here. Again, I can put an adjustment layer here, a hue and saturation, and I've got a mask, and I've got the actual colors on the left, and we've got the little display above, and I've got control of the hue at the top, the saturation in the middle, and the lightness at the bottom, and I can change the hue of the picture. So if I wanted to have a bit of a play with the colors in the picture, I can start playing around with the hue. So if I wanted, like those old-fashioned posters where you used to solarize the image and get it pretty groovy and put it up on the wall, there's no why stop with the image that you've taken? And if you're preparing a presentation image, you can have a bit of a play with it. So maybe if we want to put a bit more red in the yellows, we could adjust the reds. I've got above that, I've got you can see there where it has the word master with a little finger with some arrows either side. The master is all the colors that we're looking at, but if I click on the master, I can actually be more selective. So here I can choose just the reds or just the yellows. So if I choose just the yellows, and I do the same thing with my hue and saturation slider, It's only changing the yellows in the picture. So then if I wanted to brighten up or change the tone of the yellow, or I wanted to change the saturation of the yellow, I can choose just the yellow to play around with the saturation and the colorway of the yellow. Right, so I've got a bit of control there. I can do the same with the red channel. So this nice big bold red at the bottom, the rusty sort of red at the moment. So if we wanted to change the rustiness to blend in with the yellow, we could adjust it here so the yellow matches, or we can crank it the other way and make it a lot more redder, and we can increase the saturation and really get the red popping out. I tend to most of the action in the image is up in the top right there with the 3 circles and the yellow below it. So I think if we maybe increase the saturation of the brightness of the red there, that might kind of balance so the eye doesn't get pushed up into the top right-hand corner, but just enables us to enjoy the whole image. One of the other things we can control, so the 3 things that we have to control as photographers, we've got light. All right, so the lightest area of the image will be the place that attracts our eye firstly. So in the top right-hand corner around those 3 circles, the white part of the image, that's probably where our eye goes to first. The second thing that we can control is color. So that, for instance, if I turn this image into black and white, you can see that the way that you read the image is quite different to when it's in color to when it's in black and white. Right, so that what we're seeing there in black and white is really the tones, and when we add the color, you look at the impact. If I turn that off, you look at the impact of the red and where it draws your eye in the image. Right, so immediately color. We use color to draw the eye, so we can manipulate where the eye goes in an image with color. And the third one is contrast. So just how much contrast there is between the two, we can control, and it changes where we look. So to demonstrate that, if I do a contrast adjustment layer here, so if I increase the contrast, you can see how it clarifies the image, and it draws me into different areas of sharpness, and it saturates the colors in the contrast. All right, so they're the 3 things that we're controlling when we're editing. So we've got light, color, and contrast. They're the three big ticket items that we have for control. So what else might we do? So let me butcher Maribi's image a little bit more. So with these masks, so the little white panels enable me to selectively apply the changes. I can brush the changes in and out. All right. So for instance, what I'm doing here is I might just the area above the red I'm looking at might be a little bit dark. So what I'm doing here is I'm just brightening the image. I come down to my mask. I invert my mask so it hides the change. Then I go B for brush. And because the mask is black, I want a white brush. So I come over to the left-hand side and I change my brush to white. And I can just selectively black, another go as white. I can selectively just brush in a little bit of that brightness just in there, just to lift the color and the reflection of the building just above that red panel there. And you can see on the mask there that we're down in the bottom right-hand corner, next to brightness and contrast, where the black mask, it's got some white marks on it now, and what it does is, if it's black, it hides everything. If it's white, it lets the modification through. So where I brushed it in white, lets that brightness change come back through into the image. So yeah, so there we go. All right, great job, Maribi. What's everyone else think? Great feedback there,
Excellent.
guys.
Yeah, really good shot, Maribi. Well done.
Tim, I'd like to know what the shooter had done before she sent you the image.
Okay, Maribi might even in the chat, she might be able to actually put share the raw file. Got for that, Maribi?
Yeah, I need to open the Lightroom.
Yes, so you can either just email the raw file across to me,
Yeah.
or you're up for that, pop it in the chat, and then we can just have a look at So, well, what we might do, maybe the next image we have a look at is one from Rosie, and Rosie has just given me her straight out of camera shot, and we can have a little bit of a play with that. So why don't we do that while Maribi has a look. So I'll open another file. So let's go. Here's Rosie's shot. All right, so that's Rosie's straight out of camera shot. So she's obviously similar thing where she's just looking at, well, you get 2 for 1, don't you? You get the facade of the building you're photographing, and then you get the reflection of the building in the background behind that's on the facade. So what do? Where do we start? All right, so one of the things that I tend to always do with my architectural photography, and that is make all the verticals vertical. So there's a couple of different ways that you can do that. So in Photoshop, it pops up. You can see in the bottom right-hand corner there's a background layer, and it's got a little lock on it. So that means that if we ever want to come back to the original file, if we've made a few mistakes, we can always come back to the original file. And then so the first port of call is making duplicating that layer. And for those who are PC driven, that's Control J, or what's that, a Command J for Mac. All right, so you can see that's created layer 1, and layer 1 is just an exact copy of the background layer. So there's a couple of ways I can straighten this up. So top left-hand corner, I click on the edit. There's a thing called perspective warp. So I click on perspective warp. And what that does is it gives me a grid I can drag out. And so if you watch what happens here, so I'm going to pick the little corner of the mullion there, and I'm going to drag a grid out. Maybe I choose, I might have to adjust this because it's off the page. Oh, we can come back here a bit. All right, so I drag it down to that one. And this is you got the control of the 4 points in the corner, so I can click and hold that one. I can drag that one up to the mullions where they line up. And I can click and drag this one down to the mullions on the bottom on the left. All right, so I've now got a grid that matches up with the picture. Up in the top left-hand corner, we have a thing called warp. I click on warp as the control. Then I've got the choice of making the verticals vertical. So if I click on that one, that does the verticals. And if I want the horizontals horizontal, I can do that as well. All right, so I've got a choice as to what I want to do with the perspective warp. So I can completely square the building up in using perspective warp. All right, so we'll just cancel that. So for some reason, I'm not seeing all my controls. Let's just reduce that a little bit. Why am I not seeing it? All right, we'll just drag that off and do that again. I might just only want the vertical. So that's one way of doing it. The other way is that you can. The other thing you can do is you can. I can, with the marquee tool, select the whole picture, and then I'm going to warp and twist the picture with some controls here. So what I'm going to do is Control C for cut and Control T for transform. And you can see now I have some points around the picture. I've got one in each corner, one in the middle of each side. And if I hold down the control button or the command button while I'm going, I can actually drag these things. All right, so I can manually choose to drag that to the corner. Maybe in the other corner, we can drag that one using my command while I hold the command button, and I can just work the image that way. What tends to happen is it does a little bit of a seesaw thing where it pulls on one side and then you've got to pull it back the other side. So it's a little bit more slower. So, all right, so something like that. And just using that tool, I've been able to line up all the verticals. If I wanted to keep on going and I want to line up these others, I could, with command tool. I can also drag these down. I can play around with the composition now that I've got all the data on the screen, so that I can choose the best way to represent what I've captured. Right, so I can maybe manipulate this out. Maybe if I want that mullion coming right out of the corner there, if I'm really into things coming out of corners, I can have that bottom one coming straight out of the corner. I can take that one and I can put that one up into the other top corner there. So I've got control then about the graphic nature of what's inside the square, and I've also stood up all my verticals, so I'm getting that satisfaction of having all my verticals plumb. And I can then choose here, do I start halfway through the column? Is that what I'll finish off, or do I start with windows so it's nice and dark? So I have some choice there as to just how I frame my image. So let's say we do that. So the pros and cons, if I've got the column, I've got a bright edge. If I bring it into the windows, I have a dark edge, which means I think the diagonal lines that the mullions are causing across the image is probably stronger if I don't have that white edge. All right, so if I want to emphasize the diagonals, maybe I go there, and then I just do a fine little tweak here and get that guy coming right out of the corner and this guy coming out of that corner. All right. So I get an awkward edge down the bottom there. We're just seeing the top of those windows. So maybe I need to have a little bit more of a play there and get rid of those windows there and compromise. All right, so something like that, not 100%, but close enough for the exercise. All right, so the first part is the graphic structure of the image. So now I've got something that's a little bit more graphic the way that I've presented it, because it's emphasizing those diagonals on those mullions. So we'll click yes for that. So done. And then I can play around with the colors and the brightness and the like. So at the moment, the blue is probably brighter on the left-hand side of the image, and we've got darker on the right-hand side. So we can emphasize that. So if we want the sense of the light washing over the image, so let's go into levels and see what that's doing. All right. So you can see the histogram there, where we've got black on the left, white on the right, and you can see that the image looks a bit flat and muddy, and that's because the white point, which is the right-hand side of the histogram, is a long way away from where the value of white is. So I can join the two. If I pinch the white value in, that's then increasing the. So I've now got a much brighter, crisper, sharper image by matching up white with the histogram. Right. I can also do the same with the midtones. So if I want to just ease off the blacks a bit there. All right. So so if I turn that on and off, you can see the just how much more engaging the image is, because it's got that luminosity is just improved. Right. So that adjustment has a mask on it. You can see the little white box. So I could choose not to do it to the whole image. So if I do Control I, which inverts the mask and turns it black and turns that adjustment off. On the left-hand side, about halfway down here, we've got a gradient tool. I can click on the gradient. I've got a white brush up at the top in the gradient. I want to choose that guy, which starts from white, and then I can actually drag the gradient onto the image to do it softly. I tend to like gradients because they do a better job than me trying to use the brush. So, so you can see there that I could choose to just brighten up the left-hand side of the image just to get that sense of the light washing onto the image a little bit more. All right, so if I turn that on and off, you can see where I've just brightened the left-hand side. If that's on and off, I can have another go. So we get another brightness and contrast layer, and I can. I've got a couple of different. There's always more than one way to skin a cat. So the other option we have in Photoshop is not only levels but curves. So what curves does is it does the same thing. It represents the histogram in the middle. But I have a diagonal line this time between black and white, and I can, if I grab the midpoint, which is midtones, I can. It's a slightly different graphic representation, but achieves a similar result. or I could say, well, I want to brighten the midtones, which is represented by moving the curve up. If I grab somewhere in the middle of the blacks and drag that curve down, it's telling me I want to darken the blacks. Right? So I've got the ability to increase contrast by brightening the midtones, darkening the blacks. Right? So that's another way of achieving that. So there again, because it's an adjustment layer, I can go Control or Command I, turn that off. This time, to test my brushing abilities, we'll grab a brush. So if you use the square bracket arrows, you can use those to increase or decrease the size of the brush. Up the top here, where it says 4,000, I always have a hardness of 0 because it's nice. It's better to lay up a number of different layers rather than just one heavy hit. I tend to do 2 or 3 brushes in. An opacity up the top, I find 30% good, and a flow of 50%, and those are my standard settings. So a hardness of 0, opacity of 30, flow of 50, and then I can just gently brush that adjustment on, and you can see how subtle that is. So if I want to do more of it, I can just brush it 2 or 3 times, but it gives me the ability to much more control by doing it subtly. All right. So now we're getting the sense of, so if I turn that on and off, we're now getting that sense of the light coming from the left-hand side. So rather than just being a plain, simple elevational treatment, we've now got a sense of the light washing across the facade as well, another added part of the story. So there you go. All right. To put a border on it in Photoshop, what you do is what we're going to do is increase the size of the picture and make the increase size white. All right, so to do that, we go to Image, we go to Canvas Size, and you can see here that the image is, almost 700 millimeters wide and 460 millimeters high. And we're going to increase the size of the canvas. So let's pick an arbitrary size of maybe 500. And down below that, you can see I've ticked the box relative, which means it's going to go 500 millimeters in, well, we don't want 500 millimeters, we want 50, say. 50 millimeters, and it's going to be relative to the current image. And you've got some anchor points down below. So if I click up there, you could say 50 millimeters just from the top edge, 50 millimeters from the bottom edge, or this way we want 50 millimeters everywhere, and the extension is going to be white. And I click OK, and there I get my white border, right? Because it's created a white. It's increased the size of the canvas and made it white, right? So that's how you do your little canvas sizes. If you like a fatter border, then you go and redo the process. So up here I can undo canvas size, go to Image, Canvas Size again, and if 50 wasn't enough and we wanted a bit fatter, we go to 100. When you're working with the files, after a while, you get a feel for the size that you want to do, and maybe that's a little bit more, photographic in nature. It's about the size of the border you get. All right, so putting the white border on it. If I turn that on and off, you can see how the image was, the brightness of the image there, which we increased, probably isn't enough because it's now looking a bit flat now that we've got the white border on it. So if I go back to levels, you can see here that I got a gap between where the white point is and the start of my histogram. So if I want to increase the brightness of the whole image, I just bring that in and pinch it into the beginning of the histogram, and I'm back to the same sort of impact that I had without my white border. So there we go. All right. So Maribi has just go to the other screen. She's downloaded, given me the raw file. So let's have a look at this. I'll just copy that across, and then we can open up the raw file for you. Is all that making sense? Am I talking gobbledygook at the moment, or?
So it's just a question saying, are you using a mouse or drawing pad? And I said to Michael,
I do both.
Using a mouse today, but you use
That's right. So I've got a Wacom tablet, which having been an architect, we were one of the first offices. I worked in an office in Crow's Nest where we were one of the first to actually go to CAD. I started my career with a rotary pen on vellum, drawing with pens, and then we went into to CAD. And then part of that process with the CAD system in those days was that you had a thing called a digitizer, which was it was about 600 square, and it was broken up into a grid, and the grid represented what the screen is you were drawing on. And you used to have to hold this. It was like a mouse, but you move that around on the pad on the tablet, and it would coincide with the spots on the screen, right? And at the same time, you used to have to take notes. So I became ambidextrous during the process. I learned to use my mouse with the left hand and write with my right hand because I'm a right-handed. So I tend to do the same thing now. What's that? So what was that back in 1982? All right. So I'm still ambidextrous from that process. So what I tend to do is hold my mouse in the left hand, and I use a tablet with a pen in the right hand. And what I find is that the tablet is a little bit more tactile. You get the sense of using a pen or a pencil in the drawing motion, and I tend to use the mouse on the left for clicking and negotiating through the various menus that you got to do. So it tends to free up the process, but it might be a little bit much to take on if you. I've had that learning process. All right, what am I doing? I've got to get this thing of Maribi's on something. So let me just file it here for a sec.
It's a nice job on Rosie's picture. I like that.
Like a little adjustment there.
Yeah.
We're going to go in here, and then we're going to go into September 2024. And we're going to save raw file there. All right, so that should be ready on this. So at home, I've got two screens. So the left-hand one, which we're working on, I have Photoshop dedicated to Photoshop. The right-hand screen, I have my emails, my Word programs, and everything else. Just frees up the space. All right. So this is Maribi's original image. So you can see that she hasn't actually done much apart from a little bit of a ramp and twist and just a little bit of adjustment in contrast. So very similar to the actual capture. So what's that worth? Probably with a 200mm lens, was it, Maribi?
I got this with the 200 lens.
Yeah. So that's one of the virtues. When we were walking around, it was the kind of, what do you shoot with? You shoot wide. So it comes down to the architectural photography that you're engaging at the time. So with as with all sorts of genres, there's different ways of photographing. So you can photograph to tell the story of the building, all right? So you might be putting together a story that's following the design of the building, the concepts that the architects use to put the design of it together. And you're trying to tell the story about not only the concept of the building, but also the finishes and the impact in the streetscape. So you're going to take different sorts of photos, all right? You're going to take the photo of the building in the street so you can see how it relates to its neighbours. You're going to take pictures of the building itself, dealing with the concept of the building. And then you might take some closer shots, just looking at the materials of the building. So yesterday we were concentrating more on shapes, patterns, and having a bit of fun with the reflections in the streetscape. So this one probably falls in the category of looking at the materials, all right, the materials of the building. But it's got a nice little twist there, isn't it, where it's actually seeing the neighbour across the road, and you're able to. It gives that abstract nature because then it starts messing with the glass facade. So you're not only just seeing the glass facade, but it's getting distorted by what it's reflecting in it. So this falls into it's not a documentary shot. It's not. It's more just exploring the shapes, patterns, colours, and that's a more than legitimate way of dealing with an image. So. What might we do to this image, Maribi? how might I play with it? Am I allowed to
Yeah,
do
go.
things to it? All right.
Yes.
So one of the interesting things is maybe we look at what I did to Rosie's picture and see what that does, and if that's. But often what I'll do is when I'm processing images of the what if question, I'll try stuff. All right. So I'll what if I do this? And it might be a roaring success. It might be an absolute failure. But what you got to do in the creative process is be prepared to make mistakes. All right. You can't be a creative without making mistakes. All right. And that's part of the process of trusting yourself to give it a go. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And in some ways, the hard call is, did it work? All right, because you're the critic and you're the one who's got to decide whether it worked or not. And then you throw it out in front of some other photography friends, and the other photography friends say, "No, didn't work," or they might say, "Fantastic job." So part of the creative process. All right, so with this one, if we do there's a shortcut for putting that marquee box around it, and that's Control A or Command A. And that selects everything. It didn't select it. Why are we not selecting? Oh, wrong one. Control A. There we go. All right. So the Control A or Command A puts a little marching ants around the box. Control C is probably should have made a copy of this before we started, shouldn't we, Maruby? So let's go back and we'll do Control J and just do a copy of another layer. We'll do that again. Control A. Control C actually cuts everything within the box, and or Command T, and Control T then is a transform tool. All right, so if we let's have a look at what happens if we try to stand this up a little bit more. We're actually going to twist it a little bit and concentrate the story. All right, so at the moment, one of the things is if you have less of the stuff in the image, you can make it more potent. All right, so the question is if I, red square, no red square. All right, so let's have a look at the impact of what the red does to the image. All right, so you can see immediately that when I take the red out of frame, I might have squared up the image and got myself, now I've got the emphasis really on the leading lines of the mullion in the facade, and what that's doing to the image, right? And what you might find is you'll get more than one image out of one photograph, right? So that is a cool image, but it's not the same one as Mareeby's, all right? But I might take, so if I was Mareeby, I might have that one image and I might play with this and end up with 3 different versions of it. So that this might be an alternate version, all right? Because then what I'm doing is I'm concentrating on the 3 circles up in the top, the reflections across the facade, that shadow that sort of runs down the left-hand side of the 3 circles gives me a nice break in the image. And I've left the mullion in from the edge just to give a little bit of articulation on the left there. All right, so that might be one. So let's so the way that I would do that is that as we go, I would do a save as, and I'm going to save it as version 2 because Mareeby's already done version 1. Right. And then I might do the same thing. So what I might do up here, so up in the little top right-hand corner, that little triangle of silver is kind of annoying me. Is that annoying you too, Mareeby? That little triangle up in the corner there. So one of the things that AI is fantastic for is actually patching. All right, so if I do a little marching ants around that, so I use the lasso tool to select it. Now, if I right-click on it, I can go Generative Fill, and what it does is it will look at the areas around and do something with that and try and blend it into the picture more. And I'm hoping it's going to pick the panels and run the panels into the corner. There we go. All right, so it's read the image, read the bounding areas, and now I've filled that corner to match in with the context, which is the panels going at the opposite direction. All right, so if I turn that on and off, you can just See the difference there? Kind of, instead of giving you a distraction for your eye to run to, sort of closes it off. So that sort of use of AI, I think, is pretty cool, because then instead of me having to go back and take my photo, I fixed it. The other thing that I might have a look at is this little dot here is annoying me. So let's just get rid of him. So I've got to have all my pixels to get rid of him. So I'll get rid of that. All right. So apart from tidying up and everything, I quite like the way that the light sits in around the circles up here. I'm getting a nice sense of the, that light on the facade and the dribbling down on the facade there. And then I can play around with the color and contrast. So to do that, let's go to a levels layer. And you can see here where the histogram peaks lots of midtones, all right? So midtone heavy, not many blacks, and the whites tend to peak off. So what happens if I tell Photoshop to remap the image and move the whites in? You can see that it's getting, there's bits of the image. So what you tend to look at is when you're doing adjustments, they're not global adjustments, all right? So we're going to do adjustments of where it works, all right? So if I drag this in, it works in parts of the image, but not in others. It burns some bits out, highlights others. So that's the virtue of a mask, right? So Command I or Control I, I'm going to turn that off. And the bits where I quite liked it were down here, where I just brightened the facade a bit, right? Just in those dark areas. I'm only going to do it selectively, brighten up that lovely blue in the corner and get a sense of the sky reflection, and just do a selective. So you can see there the mask down the bottom right-hand corner. It's really the bottom left-hand corner of the mask I've adjusted, but just brightens the image a bit. Okay. The second one, which will be maybe a curve, because curves are good for some things. You can see now that we've got a really big peak in the midtones. So, so what I can do there again is I can lift the midtones a touch, a little smidgen, and this gap in the blacks, I can then move that down. You can see what that's doing. It's actually adding contrast. Right? So by increasing the blacks, lifting the lights, I'm getting the contrast in it. So there again, I can invert that and just brush it in and give. So if you remember, light, color, contrast. So what I'm doing is I'm brushing contrast into the center of the picture. And that's doing two things at once. It's giving me the contrast between the darks and the light, but it's also intensifying the saturation of the yellows. So if I turn that on and off, you can see the yellows are actually a little bit brighter there in the middle. So I think I'd probably stop with that as an alternative number 2. What do you think of that one, Maribi?
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah. All right. What else can we do to that poor image of yours? So let's open another version of it. We have, yeah. So we can see the original again. All right. So what if we went the other way and tried to emphasize the red? All right, so I do a Command J. I do Command A, Control C, Control C, Control T. And then what happens if we stretch it the other way? What do we have? So where's the red component? We put that right near the top of the frame. Not liking this one as much, but it gives us an option. Circle in, circle out. What do you think? Why don't we be really awkward and have the circle halfway through? And we can probably fix that little bit of an area. That one coming out of the corner. That one coming out of the corner as well. And maybe something like that. Right, so I've got this little spot in the middle here, which doesn't quite work. So I get my little lasso tool. Lasso my little black area there. Right click on it. Generative fill. Generate. And hopefully that little triangle there gets filled in. So what I'm doing here graphically is I'm dividing the picture in half on the diagonal. All right, so I'm using that shadow to give me two bits of the picture which are the same shape, and then I'm distributing the bits either side of that. All right, so that's an alternative way of distributing or breaking up the image. So giving quite a strong graphic. So instead of splitting it vertically in half, we're splitting it diagonally in half. I'm putting a bit in each side. So that's another way of actually distributing the things graphically across the image. So there again, I might get rid of that little dot that we had there, and then I can then play around with the strength of the colors and everything, trying to balance. So do something similar. So maybe I go into curves. In curves, I've got the ability to actually go auto to see what Photoshop will give me. So I can click on auto, and that'll do an adjustment which Photoshop reckons is okay. I like quite a lot of it. I don't quite like what it did to the sky. So there again, because it's an adjustment, I can paint some of that out. So I can go B to brush. I can come over here, and because it's a white mask, I can choose a black brush, and the bits of the sky that it didn't like, I can come in here and I can just brush out the impact on the sky. But I might leave a lot on the balance of it. And I might do something similar with the red. I might just increase the maybe just the one, drag that off. So if I go in hue and saturation, and I choose just the reds, maybe I increase the red, increase the brightness of it, play around with it. So I've got a much stronger sort of flash in the bottom corner to try and balance the white up the top. I've probably overbalanced it. So what I probably need to do is up in the top right-hand corner, we can get a little bit trickier here with our masking. So before down, I've got a little tool there, which is a brush with marching ants. If I choose plus at the top, if I click and hold, it'll actually put marching ants on the image. All right, so I can actually select areas of the image by doing that. If I click minus, I can just dab out a couple of the bits where it went over the edge. What I'm going to do here is I can do all sorts of things now. I've defined that as an area. So some of the choices I've got, brightness and contrast. So just the area that I selected, I can brighten and darken. I can change the contrast of. So if I turn that one, yeah, so that's an option. If I, in the mask I've got, if I hit Control and click on the mask, it brings the mask back. So I can then use it for another adjustment. So I can go to maybe hue and saturation. So in hue and saturation, I've got the same mask. I can click on the colors. And maybe in here, one of the things that happens when you're shooting buildings is you get a lot of cyan reflection from the sky. And if we want the white of around those three circles to be whiter, I desaturate the cyan. So if I saturate to show you where the cyan is, you can see it. And if I desaturate it, I've now got a nice crisp white around those three, which I think probably helps. So if I click that on and off, you can see that just that touch of blue sort of muddies the white. If I turn the cyan off, I've got a nice crisp white. So now I've got, if I'm starting to look at elements of color, I've got white up in the top, I've got red down the bottom, and I can be a little bit more specific about the purity of the color. All right. So I think I'll probably do that. And then I think we've probably got version 2. What do you think, Marivi?
Yeah, it works also.
Yep. So all the things that you try. All right. So let's have a look at a couple of other images. How are we going for time? Going pretty well. All right. Have we got any questions there? All right. Monitoring those. All right. Next. We've got a couple of other, why don't we keep on going on a couple of your images there, Marivi? So we've got this one. All right. So this is a Harry Seidler building, and we're looking across the road at the new Macquarie building, and the base of the Macquarie building is the new Martin Place metro station. So the Macquarie building is the one, if you've looked into the city, the new one that's appeared with the round or the curved top, the semicircular top, and it's got the big white O of Macquarie on the front, so it looks like a minion. All right, so it's the new minion building in in the city. So one of the great things that works here is that let me show you another shot so this puts it in context. All right, so then you'll understand the things that we're playing with. Outside of the building. I'm going to quieten the troops. We've got some grandchildren downstairs who are causing havoc. We might quieten them down. Here we go. Just the downloads. Yeah. And just trying to find a street shot for you to, so those who don't know the building can understand what we're looking at. Oh, here we go. All right, so the outside of the building looks like this. So it's a Harry Seidler building from back in the 80s. And this is one of the ones where we actually started looking at the concept of the building. All right, so in this building here, the structure's put on the outside. He's used the sort of bracing running up the building to give it some interest rather than just all the louvers that are on the front. But in the top right-hand corner, you can see where there's a chunk of building missing. And that happens down through the office tower. And in the bottom left, you can see where it pops out, and it actually provides natural light to the atrium or the entry courtyard. All right, so the concept of the building was trying to get some natural light down through a big high tower. How do you do that? Because it faces the right-hand side to the north, so you can get some natural light down into the building. All right, and then so this building actually had a concept that we could play with when we were shooting. So it was not only trying to capture the materials and playing around with the colors and the graphics and the rest of the building, but it was also trying to capture the concept of the office building stepping aside in areas as it rose, so that it provided the ability for natural light to get down through the building. Did that open or not? You probably didn't see it. That's the picture we were talking about. Sorry about that if that wasn't displaying. So that's the image that I just was chatting about. So Maribi's shot is taken from inside the atrium, looking back out. So that what we're doing is looking through the frame. We're looking across to the new building on the other side of the street. So it does a couple of things. It's kind of a context shot, isn't it? So it shows us what the building is looking out as, like looking across to its neighbours. But I think what it does really well is it just captures the sense of light that was running down the canyon of the city at that time of the morning. So really great way using the reflections, using the framing of the building that we're in to grid and frame the shot up. Because she's put the vertical of it bang in the middle, and then it splits, the legs split at the bottom down to each corner of the image. Right? So interesting shot. So how do we accentuate the things that have been captured? Because often the camera is, or most of the time, the camera falls short of capturing what we see. And it's a continuous game that we play as photographers, trying to convince the camera to see what we see with the various tricks we apply to it, choosing different lenses to try and get it to see. We've got peripheral vision. The camera doesn't have peripheral vision. How do we capture everything that we're experiencing with a camera? Hard job, because the camera is pretty hopeless at capturing what we see. So it's a whole game of manipulating these images to try to get them across the line, to get them back to actually represent what we're trying to capture. Some people give up and they just look at what the camera provides, and then they work with what the camera's provided. Others are a little bit more persistent and keep on working, mucking around with settings, changing things, and trying to grapple and get most of it done with the settings. So let's have a bit of a play and see where we go. So one of the things that I think might strengthen this is the we'll have a play and we'll see if it does. All right. So first thing is I copy the background layer. And I go control Alt. What am I doing? I'm doing the Control A, Control C for cut, Control T for transform, and I'm going to have a little bit of a stretch and play with this one. Right. So I think one of the things that so what Maribi has done well is she's the vertical bang in the middle. You can see where that control point is in the middle, and that vertical frame comes straight down, right down the middle of the picture. But what would be nice with this is if the legs came out of each corner. Right. So it'd be nice if that leg came out of that corner and that leg came out of that corner. That would then complete the sense of framing for the image. Right. So if I just, and probably that one up in that corner there, it'd be nice if that one came out of the corner. So it'd be nice if the structure came out of each of the corners. All right, so if I turn that on and off, you can see the difference. All right, so I think it just strengthens the image just by doing that. Do we agree, Maribi? I haven't butchered anything too much so far.
It's okay.
I have permission to continue.
Yes.
All right. So I think that is something that helps strengthen. The other thing is what's happening up in the left-hand corner of the image. We've got a lot of dark shadow, and it'd be nice if there's a little bit, maybe the reflections that are happening on the other side happened up in the top left-hand corner too. So let's have a little bit of a play and see what we can do. All right, so there is another transform that you can use. And if you go to Edit, Transform, we go down onto the next menu and go Warp. If I click that, what you can see now is I have lots of grids across and I've got more control points. Right, so rather than just stretching in the simple ways that we did before, I can actually come onto the image and I can move stuff around in the image. All right, all different sort of control. So let's do it again. So that was just to demonstrate the flexibility and the nature of what we're playing with. So if we go Edit, Transform, Warp, what I can then do is if I say drag this one in the top left-hand corner, if I drag it, it's only affecting what's up in the top left-hand corner and leaving most of the rest of the picture alone. All right, I've got to do a little bit of adjustment. But what it enables me to do is to modify parts of the building without throwing away what I've done with the rest of it. All right. So with that little stretch there, so what I've done is I've been able to open up the image in the top left-hand corner. Yeah. So I think that that now contributes in a similar way to what the facade across the road is doing. So in some ways, we're getting a little bit more of a conversation between the blue on the facade on the other side and the facade that we've got in here. And if you're thinking about this is like being able to change lenses after the event. All right. So you've shot with a 24mm lens, but you really wanted a 12mm lens. Okay. So what this enables you to do is shoot with that 24mm lens, knowing, and often what you'll do is when you know you can make these changes, you'll shoot in a way that gives you the ability to knowingly capture enough information to then be able to manipulate the image later. But I think you'd probably agree that that's probably a good improvement. So the two things that we've done from the beginning. So if I turn those on and off, so we've started with that. I've increased the framing of it, just made it a bit more stylized with the framing with the structure, and then I've done a little bit of an adjustment to get a bit more light into the top of the image, because what that's also giving us a sense of is the light washing down from above as well. So I think that that kind of works. Right. So let's see what else we might do with this. One of the things that the cameras are also a little bit shy on is keeping the color consistent. So there's another adjustment I can do up here. So if I go to image, adjustment, down the bottom it says match color. And there's a little box in here, it says neutralize, which I can tick. And what that does is it adjusts the white balance. All right, so you can see where if Maribi's shot is quite yellow, and when I tick the neutralize box, it tends to blue it off a bit. So with the algorithms that Photoshop runs, it says that that's the properly adjusted color balance. Right? Just above the neutralize button, I have the fade option, and I can choose to accept that or blend it in. All right, so I could say, well, I want 50% of that adjustment, or I want 100% as I've got none of the adjustment, 50% as I got half of it. So we'll split the difference and say, well, I quite like how it's adjusted and taken a bit of the gold off, because I think that's probably, it gives me a starting point for some other adjustments with the brightness and contrast, which we're going to do. So trust me on this one for a minute. We'll just tick OK for that. So if I turn that on and off, there's our little gold adjustment that's been made. Now, because it is on a separate layer, I can tick this little box here and give it an adjustment layer, which means I can brush some of that in and out. All right, so we've got a white layer, I've got a black brush. Yep. Click on the thing to change it to black. B for brush. And if I like everything, but I quite like the golden glow that it was giving us before on the Safite, then I can brush some of that back in on the Safite. But I quite like how it's fixed up the color of the facade on the other side and not had so much gold. So I can concentrate the gold to give me the sense of the light washing in from the left, but I can limit the impact that that then has on the facade on the other side. Right, so if I brush that in on and off, really quite subtle. As you can see, the little gold glow that happens in there. All right, so let's go to our levels adjustment and see how the histogram's looking. So really high in the blacks, tapers across in the midtones, and quite a few whites. So it's got lots of things happening in there, but it's weighted to the left. So I could choose to lighten the midtones a bit, give me more of a sense of those reflections on the other side of the road, and lightening the midtones also exposes a bit more of the color and detail on the frame as well. Right. So if I invert that mask, B for brush, and then if I want to brush some of that in, just in the middle of the picture here, I can maybe highlight the frame a little bit. You can see how the frame's getting lifted. I'm getting more detail in the frame by just brightening that up a bit. I'm also getting more detail in the shadows. Right. And maybe a little bit more detail in the shadows down at street level too. Just making it a little less contrasty. It's still having the same impact because I've got the strong structure of the frame through the building. Maybe seeing a little bit more in the shadows there. So what I've done is lift the shadows a little bit. So if I turn that on and off, I can do that. Now, is everything in Photoshop more than one way to skin a cat? So if I stamp up all the adjustments here into one layer, which is one of those weird commands that Photoshop's come up with, which is Control-Alt-Shift-E, I can come up to here to Filter, Camera Raw. And for those who use Lightroom, you're going to say, well, that looks very much like a Lightroom menu, doesn't it? So here I've got the adjustments for colors, I've got curves, color mixer, color grading. I've got all the controls. So this is essentially a Lightroom control panel, and they've matched up it with Camera Raw. One of the great things you can do in Camera Raw is you can adjust shadows. So just you can see there 3 down. So if I drag that to the right, you can see that it lifts the shadows. I can change the exposure. I can do all those sorts of things. I've got a similar way, and you can see that the histograms shown at the top, and you've got the blue for the blue channel, the red for the red channel, the green for the green channel. So it's showing you those adjustments. So as I increase the exposure, you can see what happens is that it moves the histogram to the right, to the whites. If I exposure to the left, it moves all the histogram to the left, so it puts everything into blacks. So so you've got a graphic representation of what you're actually doing when you are post-processing. All right, but in this instance, all I want to do is increase the shadows a bit. Right? So what are we at, about 65 or something? So what I do is I click OK, and that's another way of doing it. So if I turn that off, that's using Camera Raw for shadows. That's using, the second one is using my own adjustments. And I think I quite like the Camera Raw version because I'm getting more detail out of the back of the frame and everything. I'm getting more of a sense of the light bouncing back up onto the frame. All right, so I think we probably use that one. We'll turn that other one off. All right, so if I compare that to where we started, so down here, if you hold Alt and click the eye, that'll turn all the adjustments on and off. All right, so that's where we started, and that's where we've come, just to formalize the image a little bit. But yeah, and then what are we going to do? We're going to put the what do we got here? So what I've done in the adjustments is that this frame, as it comes across and it gets to the right-hand corner, it runs uphill a bit, doesn't it? So we probably need to adjust that to do use service to your image there, Moribi. So let's go back to, we go Edit, Transform, Warp. And in this corner here, we might just drag that guy off just so that he's straight. So you've got some little adjustments there. You can. All right, so if we put a frame around this guy, what's the only other thing that kind of annoys me is that little white spot there. Let's get rid of it. Not going. Another go. There we go. All right, so it's got a continuous shot on the blue across there. All right, so then if I, just to finish him off, so if we go to our image canvas size, so this image is a little bit smaller, so it's only 60 millimeters wide. All right, so I probably only want about maybe a 10 millimeter border. All right, and then we've got the white around it, so just to top him off. So if I wanted to, let's have a look at the impact of color on this image again. So if I show it in black and white, you can see where if it's generally in the midtones, it's the term is muddy. All right, muddy is that it doesn't have a lot of contrast. All right, so one of the things you might do is, having seen it in black and white, you might want to edit that. So what you can do is actually do an adjustment whilst it's in black and white, and we can play around with the brightness and contrast so it looks right in black and white. And then I'll turn the black and white off. All right. That's another way that you can test the exposure as to with its contrast, how it looks in monotone. All right. So you can see that that gives you a means of testing what you've been looking at. So the only impact I see there, which it's done, is it's kind of burnt the detail out on this little bit of facade down here. So because it's got a mask on it, I can brush that out. So we'll turn to a black brush, and I can just dab over here and bring back the highlights that we burnt out with that process. And maybe just soften it a little bit on the transition. So just bring a little bit back, bring back that detail. So that way we've just brightened the image in the middle. Right. But this one's a great one because it's adding story, isn't it? So it's not only just the abstract games that we've been playing with facades in the other part, but now we're getting into trying to represent story and the best way to convey story and do that visually. So one of the other ones, just looking at this image here, so whilst we're going, is that someone trying to get in? No. All right. So if we go to color balance, so color balance is another one. So what color balance has here, if you look at in this control panel, we've got midtones, shadows, and highlights. They're the three areas that we can control. And we've got the choice, this is the color balance, cyan to red, magenta to green, yellow to blue. So if at the moment, if you think the image is too warm, I can come in and I can change the color balance and make it cooler by sliding to the blue. If I double click on that, it brings it back to 0. If I want to add a little bit of green to compensate for some magentas, or if I want to send it more magenta, I can play with it there. Or if I want to bring out the reds in the image, I can give preference to the reds or preference to the cyans. All right, so they're the color balances that Photoshop uses. So that's an option. Or the other option we have, which we used before, which was the hue and saturation, and then just going by channel. All right. So in this instance, what I'm thinking is that we want to maybe bring out the red of the granite cladding on the base of the building that's opposite. So if I choose the reds, I then can use my this little hand with the arrows either side, finger pointer either side. If I click on it, what I can do is if I, with the eyedropper, choose the color, click and hold, you can see that that hand with the two arrows appears. If I move it to the left whilst I'm holding it, it desaturates it. If I slide it to the right while I'm holding it, it saturates it. All right, so rather than going by, so that gives me the ability to go around and actually color pick and adjust colors by selection in the image. So I might choose to maybe just increase, I can see the value there on saturation. So let's give it maybe plus 10, 9, 10, somewhere there. So if I turn that on and off, you can just see it just lifts the little bit of the red on the other side there. Likewise, I can do the same with the blue. So if I think the blue on the buildings is too much, then I can go into probably cyans. I'll show you if we go in. So if I go on master, it doesn't matter because it's going to choose it. So if I click the little hand there with the arrows, come across to this facade, click and hold, I can, it's not doing anything. Like, yep. Oh, it's because we need to turn it on. That's it. There we go. So I can click and hold, desaturates the cyans. I can crank the cyans up. So I've got an ability there to then selectively go around and play with the colors in the image. This is the blues, so I can desaturate the blues, bring the blues on. So if you want to just go around and balance the images, you can there just by doing that as well. All right, what's next? Anything anyone has in mind they'd like to see, or just like watching? We have the one last image of Maribi's, and then we'll have a bit of a play with something else. So Maribi's messing with us. She's taken an image and then turned it on its side. So for those who, so the original image is, swing that to the right. That's the original image. Lots of building work under construction in town. So this was one that was nearby where we were going. And I think what has been fantastic as a stage set for this shot is that well, the ColourBond cladding or the corrugated iron in the background's black. All right, so that then gives us a nice isolation for these trusses, these rusty old trusses in the foreground. So So half the work's been done in what the builder's done in preparing the site for a photograph for Maribi's attention. So, all right, so we turn this guy back. So the only thing that I might fiddle with in this, let's have a look and see what color and contrast can do to the image. All right, so we go into levels. So we'll look at the histogram, very weighted in the black, and it just tapers from the black all the way out to the whites. But if I so I can pinch up the whites a bit if I want to bring out that detail, or I just go, yeah, let's go completely the other way, and let's darken the background and bring out the color. So let's concentrate on the rust. All right, so let's maybe brighten that like that, and then if we come into hue and saturation with my little color picker, let's go and saturate the red of the rust, just so it's really jumping off the black of the background. All right, so maybe something like that. There's another little trick, even down in this pit where this photo's been taken, you can see the cyan color that's on the white of the safety balustrade there. So you're getting it's amazing when you start looking for it, how much cyan comes from the sky and muddies up your perfect whites, right? So the cyan just makes a white look quite dirty. Right, so one of the things that we could do in this image is if I go into hue and saturations, I could choose cyan and I could completely desaturate it. All right, so look at the difference in the image between having cyan or no cyan. So can you see the subtlety in there in the handrail? But what it does is it makes the whites look a lot crisper. And if the story, which is really, if we're looking graphically at what this is, it's really red, black and white. All right, so we don't want blue in there at all because we want the contrast between the red, the black and the white. So I might even do another one of these hue and saturations where I come into, rather than the master, maybe the blue as well. So I've desaturated cyan. And then one of the ways to see where the blue or the cyan is if you increase saturation, you'll see where it is. So there's a lot of blue in the black. You can see also on the balustrade, there's a lot of blue as well. So maybe I desaturate the blue as well. And if I turn the two of those on and off, you can just see how that, so the image, how it is there, and then desaturated, a lot crisper, a lot sharper because I've got the blue out of it, right? It's muddied the white. So one of the first things to do when you're looking at an image is if it doesn't look crisp, could well be cyan. The other way you can do that, but there's always more than one way to skin a cat. So if I go to curves, a curves adjustment, up on the left here, we've got three little color pickers. All right. The first one is black, second one's gray, third one's white. So what I can actually do is I can choose the white color picker. If I then put it in the picture, I can tell Photoshop what white is. Right. So if I come in here and I say, well, the white on the edge of that beam is white, it will then adjust you can see depending on what you select, it will adjust the white balance and the brightness of the image to whatever you tell it is white. All right, so adjusts the rest of the image for white. All right, so that's another way of actually going around and proving the crispness in your image. So probably somewhere there which we've selected, and now we've got a nice bright white to crisp up the black and the red. And if I've done too much there, I can stamp all those things up. Control-Alt-Shift-E, put all those changes in one layer. Oop. I can go back up to Filter, Camera Raw. And if it's all a bit murky, I can raise the shadows a bit. Just to bring back a little bit of detail in the shadows. So if it's too contrasty, just a little shadow adjustment does it. Just bring back a little bit of the detail. So if we go back to the original, so that's before, and that's after. Just to just to punch it off the page a little bit more as a bit of graphics. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So there's no other images to play with. I might show you a couple that I played with. So a couple of mine from yesterday, and then I can show you, take you through the layers and show you the adjustments that we did. All right, so let's open the picture. All right, so let me show you what I did. So the background shot behind me, let me show you that one. So that's the original capture. What we're doing, just looking into the facade of the building. And then we've got that lovely building opposite, which has got the exposed structure on the outside with the red crisscross, which I've painted and highlighted. And then we've got the exposed fire stair on the right-hand side. All right, but in this instance, I chose to just look at the structure and the facade on the left-hand side of frame. So I knew I was going to play with this when I took the shot, which is why the mullion is bang in the middle and I'm looking straight up the mullion to the sky, because that gives me a point where I can mirror the image. All right, so having an idea of what you can do with something before you take it back to play with is great, because in this instance, that's exactly what I thought I might do, and that was to just mirror it. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do here, I'm not sure if you can see it at home on your screens, but I accidentally put it on auto ISO, which meant that what it did was keep all the other settings the same and went to a very high ISO, so the image is quite grainy. All right, so one of the things that I'll demonstrate here is what Topaz can do. All right, so let's just open this. So we're not going to do any adjustments at all. Just open it into Photoshop. So if you haven't used Topaz at all for denoising, I shall show you what it does. So if you have a look in close here, you can see just how noisy this image is. You can see all that. All right, so Topaz AI, once it's loaded in my system, it comes in under Automate. So I click down to Automate, and then I go down to, I've got two Topaz products, Topaz Gigapixel, which enables you to increase an image 6 times if you're going to print it at a bigger size than it is, or the Topaz Photo AI. So I click on it, and you probably won't see the menu because I'm not sharing the menu. Let me see if I can do that. Because you're still seeing the Photoshop screen, presumably. All right, can I share the Topaz window? No, because it's a pop-up window, I can't share it, but I can share the screen. So let's share the screen so you can see that. So I think you can now see the Topaz screen sitting on top of the picture?
Yeah.
Yes? No?
Yeah, it's good.
Yes? Okay. All right. So in this, so Topaz, it reads the image. This little bar in the middle, if you click on it, it's going to show us before and after, all right, of what it's going to do to the image. So I've got I can choose what enhancements I'm going to add. So in this one, I'm going to go denoise. So I click denoise, and it tells me that it wants to do this much denoising, and it goes away and it does it. It tells me it's enhanced. And if I slide this little thing across, you can see the difference between denoised and not denoised. So pretty extraordinary job it does. I can also, if I want to, I can color balance, I can sharpen it. There's all sorts of other things, and you can actually upscale in Topaz. But for this exercise, all I'm going to do is denoise. So I'm going to say export to Adobe Photoshop. It'll go and do its thing. And then what it does is it creates the denoised image and puts it on a separate layer back in Photoshop. All right, so you can see it at the top there. TP AI layer remove noise. All right, so if I now zoom into this guy, I'm going to just change the sharing again. I'll go back to the Photoshop page. So let's go back there. All right, so now that's just the Photoshop screen. All right, so if I go, I zoom right in, you compare that to what we saw before with our noisy image. Done a pretty good job, hasn't it? Quite extraordinary. All right. So, all right, so that's the image we're going to start with. So one of the things that often what's in our image is determined by what lens we use. And we, even though you might shoot with a 200 or a 70mm or whatever, often you'll get more in the shot than the reason for why you took the shot. All right. And then you've got to go through this process of when you get the shot back on your computer at home, you sort of say, well, why did I take the shot? What was it that made me press the button, the shutter release button? What stuff have I got in my shot that I don't really need? Okay. So in this instance, one of those things, and I'll show you the reason for this, one of the things might be the sky. All right. So I might have had to have held my camera where I held my camera to get the right reflection. And I've got the sky, but do I need the sky? Right. So one of the what ifs is, what happens if I don't have the sky? All right. Is that so? When I do that and take the sky out, immediately it's a stronger image. So therefore, the sky is a distraction. All right. When I took the shot, I didn't think the sky was a distraction, but now that I can concentrate it, I can see that the sky is probably a distraction and the image is stronger if I don't have the sky. I'm simplifying the image by deleting stuff. Okay. Let's, so choice number one, delete sky. All right. Choice number two, I got this little reflection in the facade up on the top left there, which I don't necessarily want. So I can either try to get rid of the bit in the reflection, or do I actually need the reflection? Okay, so I go and I do my Control-A, Control-C, Control-T. What happens if I get rid of the reflection? Is that stronger? And I reckon it probably is. All right. So if I don't need it, it's a distraction. All right. So it's a bit like if you cast your mind back, if you're ever good at English, you might have had to have written stuff. All right. And you got a choice of, usually you had to, you had a choice of an essay or a short story or a poem. All right. And if it's all about the same subject, it's really about the amount of stuff you use to tell the story. So when it comes down to telling a story, you will have your first go at, writing the story. You'll then start editing, and you'll start leaving stuff out that you don't need, or finding ways of saying things more simply. Right? It's exactly the same process in photography that we're just going through, is that you apply the same process. How do I simplify my story without losing the nature of what I'm trying to say, or the potency of what I'm trying to say? And are there ways that I can modify how I'm telling my story to add potency? All right. So in these these two adjustments, we've got rid of, it's a similar way of editing my poem to get to a haiku. All right. I'm trying to say as much as possible with as least as possible. And that is kind of the trick with a good architectural shot and a landscape shot and a portrait shot, and whatever the genre is, you're trying to say as much as possible with as little as possible, because then you get the maximum impact. So therefore, there's stuff that often is in our image that we don't need to tell the story, which is there just because it was there when I shot it, and I don't realize that I have an option of getting rid of it. All right, so in this instance, what we're doing is we're getting rid of the stuff that we don't need. All right, so so then I've got myself to that part of the image. So I can then go up into Camera Raw. I want to raise the shadows a bit. It's a little bit dark and murky down the bottom. All right, so I can raise my shadows and bring a bit of detail out into the facade of the building. I can increase the exposure a little bit. Right, and I can increase the contrast a little bit. Right, so it's sort of, I'm just looking at the left-hand side of the picture because that's the bit that we're going to reflect about the page. All right, so I click OK. All right, so the only thing we've got to adjust now is that these mullions as they run across aren't quite square to the top of the page. So we're going to do another Control, and then we're going to just adjust these and bring these up so that they're kind of parallel. Right. And the other thing I need to do, so if I'm going to mirror this thing, I've got to make sure that it's exactly plumb that I've been mucking around with it. All right, so if you've got rulers, you can grab onto the rulers and drag a line on the page, and then what I can do is I can adjust my center mullion to be bang in the middle of the page. All right, which is about there. Okay, if I go up to View, Guides, Clear Guides, I get through to my guide. All right, so what I can do is with my marquee tool, I click the second box there, I click and drag from the left-hand corner, and I come across to the middle of my mullion here, and I release. And then I right-click, and I go Layer via Copy. So what it's going to do is it's going to take that selection over on the right-hand side and put it in a separate layer. You can see that half the page has got the checkerboard, which means it's got nothing on it, and the other half of the page has got the picture. And then if I go Control or Command T, what that does is it says the selection that I've just made and put in a separate layer, I want to transform it. So if I hit Shift, because that constrains the X and Y direction, and grab the left-hand side here, I can drag that across and put it on the other side. Then I click Tick. All right. So I now have a story about that image which bears no resemblance to the actual shot I took, but probably tells the story better. And it's also a bit of a fun graphic that I've been able to create. Okay, so you're doing stuff for different reasons and different outcomes, but I like playing and creating the graphics and using the buildings as a point of departure. So we can then tidy the rest of this up. So down the bottom left-hand corners, we've got these dark diagonals. They probably don't contribute much to the image. I've got a couple of little spots on the page. The other thing I probably want to do is enhance the red of it so it pops out on the facade there. So let's have a little bit of a play with that. So if I've got to, some adjustments need all the information that have been done precedingly. So as we're going through all these layer adjustments, they just stack on top of each other. But at some point, every now and again, you've got to combine them all up into a single layer so they've got all the information. And that's that weird command to Control-Alt-Shift-E. So what I do that, and it puts all the lower layers and puts them all in layer 5. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is my Control-A, Control-C, Control-T. I'm going to, whilst I'm holding the Control button, I'm going to drag this guy out to the left to get rid of my red in the corner. My black frame in the corner, I'm going to drag the same out on the other side. Could have done this before I mirrored it, and then I wouldn't have to do it twice. Who thought of that? All right, so I've got rid of the two corners, but what's happened here is that now my nice strong columns on the outside, it'd be nice if they came right out of the corner of the page, wouldn't it? All right, so if I come down here and I hold Shift, I can drag the whole image down maybe, and I forego some of the image so I can get my columns coming straight out of the corner. All right, because that adds to the graphics there. So Control minus increases what you can see. So I've got to get that in that corner. I've got that in that corner. All right. So if I turn that adjustment on and off, you can see, I think that tidies up the base of the picture a little bit more. If I wanted to keep on going, you know, the what ifs, would it be better if I went to the knuckle? All right. So let's have a look and see if it is. If not, we won't do it. One of the options I've got when I'm setting this up, I could say, well, maybe starting at the knuckle is a good spot. Yeah, maybe not, or maybe just starting with a little bit of the knuckle, or how much of the knuckle, where should I start, right? So for the sake of the exercise, let's get rid of the blue reflection of the glass and give it a nice dark base here somewhere, or I could come to the panel on the wall, maybe there. And maybe I'll do that. That can just give me a strong base to the building. All right, so now we're going. So then we've got, if I then go into my levels adjustment, I can see what the histogram's doing. So kind of all over the shop, isn't it? Nothing, lots of midtones, lots of black. So I can brighten things up. And there again, it's going to be it's not a global adjustment. It's burnt out the top, but it's quite good in the middle. So maybe I choose that, Control A or Command I to invert it. B for brush, I've got a black background, I want to have a white brush, so we choose that as white. Brush gone. If you hit caps lock accidentally, it turns your brush off. So, so then what I can do is just dab in the middle here and just brighten up the facade with that brighter adjustment, just so getting the sense of light in the middle of the picture here. I'm leaving the top alone because it burnt out the sky, but I'm applying what it did quite a good job in the center. All right, so now I've really got the sense of that light coming down across the facade there. So I think the last protocol is really just increasing the color. What do you think? So if we go in hue and saturation, I use this little guy. I can come along here and click on the red, hold it down, and increase the saturation. Just to, there's a couple of different reds, so we'll select a couple of them. And we end up with something like that. There you go. A couple of other things of tidying up, little distractions that we don't need. So let's come in here and get rid of those couple of downlights that are lighting up either side there. And often at this stage, what I'll do is I'll zoom right in when I'm doing the adjustments, because there'll be all sorts of manners of little things. So, you know, there's a little bit of a downlight there. I don't necessarily want that thing on the corner there, maybe that either. Maybe get rid of him. And then because it's mirrored, I've got to do it on both sides. Right, so we go unblue. But you get the idea. I might even use the you're echoing there, Robbie. The couple of little bright spots here, a couple of those. So then you just go around and tidy up what needs tidying up, and you're in business. So there we go. So hopefully, where are we up to? There you go, 12 o'clock already. So there's 2 hours worth of me and Robin rabbiting on. So hopefully it's been a useful morning for you.